Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Enix. I'm the Superintendent of Reading Community City Schools, and I'd like to welcome all of you tonight to our community virtual meeting, really with the specific purpose tonight of how COVID-19 is impacting our school district with some additional information based upon what happened last week for the district and shifting from our blended learning approach to our remote learning that we are currently doing through the Thanksgiving holiday. We're going to give it just a couple more minutes. We have a few more people that are joining us as we speak right now. We're up to 28 participants. And for all of you that are currently on our meeting here tonight, this meeting will be recorded and be able to be archived onto our website as well as YouTube Live so that it can be viewed or watched by those that are not attending tonight at a later time more convenient to them. Also, if you would just a couple other quick housekeeping items. When you logged in tonight, this was automatically set for you to be muted. The idea for this evening is to first of all have a presentation, which I will share with you here in just a couple of minutes. And then when we are finished here this evening with the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers at the end. And when it looks like our participants are coming to an end, we will go ahead and lock the meeting. That is part of a protocol for a Zoom meeting that just provides an added layer of security for those that are maybe not supposed to be in the meeting. This was a live link shared, as many of you noticed, so that it was available to everyone. A little bit of a different format than what we've used previously for community chats and those types of things, where we had a smaller number of participants. Tonight was again intended to be an entire community meeting for those who would like to attend. So we are currently up to 30. And again, we'll give another 2 or 3 minutes as we have additional people maybe logging in just a couple minutes behind. While we are waiting, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and go through that process. It usually takes a couple of seconds to make that happen. So again, I'll go ahead and share my screen. I have with me tonight Colette Lewis, who is our district treasurer. She is helping assist with the entrance and actual management of the meeting. Colette, if you are, I'm not able to see anyone any longer after I presented my screen. So if you could just let me know that the sound is okay, and if we have any additional participants still coming in.
Good evening, everyone. Jason, just so you know, it looks like all participants have been admitted. I can hear you well and also see your screen.
Great, thank you. So at this time, we'd like to go ahead and get started. And once again, thank all of you for taking some time out tonight to learn a little bit more about what is going on with our district. Of course, in the news all over right now, we're dealing with the impacts of COVID-19 on really all aspects of our life. And as we know, Governor DeWine came on today and imposed a little bit of a slowdown on the state. And so, it's everywhere that we turn around. And of course, that's impacting school districts in a pretty significant way. It seems as though in the last few weeks, there's news almost every day about something related to COVID-19 in school districts around our area and our region. And of course, that is that's to be expected, obviously, as things are certainly becoming a little bit more difficult on school districts around the area. Our goal tonight is really a number of different items here, and I will not read through all of these slides for you, more so just kind of speaking over it a little bit. But purpose tonight is really to give you some background information on some of the issues we deal with in our school district every single day regarding COVID-19. It is literally an everyday occurrence where we are dealing with all kinds of different issues, but some things that are really, without living this every day, might not be known by most people. So we're going to really hone in on some key terminology tonight, suspected, probable, and close contacts are some of our normal language, as well as isolation and quarantine and what those differences are. We'll talk about a few of the issues that we've dealt with in terms of COVID-19 and impacts previously in the school year by looking at a few different case studies and what the impacts were of those certain situations that we've dealt with. And then we'll really take a look at last week, the week of November 9th, and the activity that really had significant impacts on our district and why that shift to remote learning happened really in a fairly quick way. And you'll see why that happened as we get through our presentation tonight. And then we'll end tonight with priorities and some next steps as we're looking ahead to after the Thanksgiving holiday and the planned return to school on November 30th. So that is, again, our outline for the evening. And once we're finished with that, we will get into questions and answers that some of you may end up having. First of all, we need to take a look at some of the guidance. And again, I'm not going to spend a great deal of time on Ohio Department of Health guidance, primarily because that document has not changed really since the start of our replanning for the school year. I'm going to come off of the screen for just a minute here and take a look at Hamilton County Health. There's a really great document that's been shared as far as guidance for school districts in the county. And it really does share with you some really key indicators that school districts could or should be looking at when it comes to making decisions about the school, what happens with school. This is adapted from the Harvard Global Health Institute, and this again is information that I will be happy to share, or this will be a live link also on this presentation. But this document has some guidance for what really schools should be looking at in terms of the amount of spread or the amount of cases that are happening in a local area. And you can see here on this screen that really it's broken down into the kind of the familiar red, orange, and yellow indicators, really red being encouraging remote learning if our daily cases are greater than 25 per 100,000. And then you can read down through the rest of this list. What's important to see about this is as you go down, this is a document that's updated it was last updated on November 11th, so that would have been last Wednesday. And this next slide from the Hamilton County Health Department is the 7-day rolling average of daily new cases per 100,000, which again refers back to that previous slide. And this is the 4-county region of Butler, Warren, Claremont, and Hamilton County. And it just shows, again, what the rolling average of the number of cases per 100,000 people. You can see in the entire 4-county region that we're clearly in the red, ranging from 44 to 48 across the 4-county region. Getting a little bit more specific, just to Hamilton County, we are looking at 44, again, as of last week, 44 cases per 100,000. And if you go back a couple of slides, just as a reminder to what schools should be considering when we reach that greater than 25 level, it is encouraging remote learning for all learners when possible. So while this is not a definitive or a requirement to live by, this is some guidance that is important to at least consider, and most importantly, along with our local information, which is the primary resource for making decisions. The next slides become a little bit smaller to see, but you'll get the idea of this as I explain it. This is the percent of COVID tests that are positive. So you often hear about the percentage or percentage of positive rate of testing. That has not anything to do with the number of tests. It's the number of tests that are positive out of the total number of tests that have been administered. So the higher the percentage, obviously, the greater the amount of transmission or spread, because we have a greater percentage of those tests being positive. So that's a really important indicator. Again, it's the 4-county region, and you can see again over the course of time here, we're looking at an increase across the 4-county region of the percentage positive rate. Again, 7.7 to 6.2 in Claremont County, and in Hamilton County, it's 8.5%, again, as of last Wednesday. Specifically to Hamilton County, this slide is a little bit more clear in that you can see Hamilton County, which is outside of Cincinnati, so the greater Cincinnati area is actually higher than what the county rate is. It's 9.8% in the areas outside the city of Cincinnati. Within the city, it's 6.6%. Again, that is an average. This scatter plot diagram really does show the variance of what that percentage rate is from day to day. And in particular, you can see here some of the outlier numbers. This reaches up greater than 15%. at this point. Again, it is a rolling average, so you'll see some days that are larger than others. However, the average there during that time period is that 9.8%. So again, this is just, again, data information to share, and interesting for part of our decision making that is really again a guidance, not a mandate, but it is information that we do look at. And I receive this kind of information really on a weekly update from the Hamilton County Health Department as part of superintendent calls that I'm on each Friday. I'm going to run through the next few slides pretty quickly. I think by this point, most people know what the symptoms of COVID-19 are. Really want to just draw attention here to first of all, there's a lot of different symptoms that can be symptoms of COVID-19, but I starred one here at the very bottom that's loss of taste or smell. And that is a very unique symptom or indicator of COVID-19. And when we find out that our students or staff members have that particular symptom, it does indicate to us a probable case. Now, without a test, it is uncertain whether it's a positive case, but it does hit the category of probable. I think we've also heard frequently enough what COVID-19 prevention may look like. Again, I'm not going to read this, but I do want to bring in just one point here, the close contact. That is a key phrase that we hear all the time or use all the time. In the CDC definition that's recently changed, although it's not something that we have changed in our practice, is that a close contact is someone who is less than 6 feet for a cumulative amount of 15 minutes in a 24-hour period. And that's really significant because it's not just a matter of somebody in a singular contact with somebody, but it's a cumulative amount over 24 hours. And again, we know that 6 feet is not necessarily magical, but it has been the standard of distancing that has been used really from the very beginning of the pandemic. And so that is, again, the CDC definition that is used by our district and our nursing department, who again works with us very closely. And while we're speaking of our nurses, I'd like to, if any of them are watching tonight, put a big thank you to all of them. They put in incredibly difficult amounts of work in helping us to navigate this and being our contacts with the Hamilton County Health Department on an everyday basis. And they really have done a fantastic job this year, and we greatly appreciate their commitment and work to this process this year. It's a very different job for them than what they typically do as a school nurse. One of the questions we often get is, well, how do we know what to do, and how and when to act is really the title of this slide. And really the most important things here is just to be very vigilant of monitoring symptoms. Families, students should be staying home if they have any symptoms at all from those previous slides, contacting primary care physician. And really, because those symptoms are so diverse, even those of us that may have seasonal allergies or the common cold or those kinds of things, all of them can be symptoms or are symptoms of COVID-19, and we'll never know specifically what is going on with us without that test. And so PCR is the type of test that's recommended. There are multiple different types of tests. The rapid test has become something that has been talked about pretty regularly, but a PCR test is the recommended one, and that it is much more of a reliable test than the rapid test. Questions we also get about during this process is the notification of those close contacts. And so when our nurses are making phone calls, it may very well have been 4, 5, 6, even 7 days after those close contact or that close contact with a positive case. And it's just simply a matter of time that it takes for those to become symptomatic, to perhaps get a test, for the test results to come back, for those to be notified up to the school district, and then those contacts being made. And so it's not unusual for a close contact to have already been 4, 5, 6, or 7 days into what would ultimately be a quarantining period, simply because of the way that the timing happens during this entire process. It does not happen quickly. And that is also part of the issue in terms of how to keep people safe and keep them, knowledgeable of what's going on with their own symptoms and their own cases. It just does not happen on a quick basis. I'm going to dive into some key terminology and protocols that go along with that. We talk about these 3 types of cases all the time in our district and really around the area. Suspected case is unique because someone has symptoms but is not a known close contact of a positive case. So this really just falls into kind of the traditional being excused from school under normal attendance procedures. If someone has a runny nose or a sore throat or any other number of ailments, but is not a known close contact, it is only a suspected case. Now, I would recommend still having a test for COVID-19 because we don't know specifically what it would be, but it is only a suspected case at the time. A probable case is much more significant because this is someone who is symptomatic, but has had a known exposure to a positive case. And this has really been a very, very significant part of the issues that we've seen in our district. Students that have come to school that have had some type of symptoms and have either been in contact with someone from, let's say, a family member. It could be somebody on an athletic team, or an outside of school activity, sleepovers, and those kinds of things where those symptoms are onset in typically that 2 to 14 days, but more normally in that 5 to 7 day range after being in a close contact. So someone who, again, is a probable case is someone that has symptoms and has a known exposure to a positive case. A confirmed case is someone who is symptomatic or asymptomatic. And it's really important to note that, that has had a positive test result. So again, the symptomatic meaning that they are having symptoms, asymptomatic means there's no symptoms at all, both of which are treated the same way, and it's also treated the same way as a probable case as well. So probable and confirmed have really the same set of guidelines where they're excused from school for 10 days to complete their isolation period, and they're unable to return to school until they're fever-free for 24 hours without medication and other symptoms have improved. For asymptomatic students, it's still a 10-day isolation period from the positive test, and as long as they've not developed symptoms. So again, we treat probable and confirmed essentially the same way. We know that not everyone goes and gets a test, but if they're symptomatic and they're close contact of a positive case, they're treated the same way. And again, that is guidance that comes from the Hamilton County Health Department. We're going to talk a little bit more here about isolation and quarantine and the differences between the two. Isolation is really what happens when someone is infected and they are required to be separate from people who are not sick. So this is for someone who is a COVID positive person or a close contact, a probable case as well. So again, the isolation period is for COVID-19 is 10 days from that positive test, or fever-free for 24 hours, and their symptoms have improved. Contagious period is really 2 days prior to those symptoms happening, which is a very difficult part of this whole process, until 10 days after those symptoms have developed. So it's really a longer period of time than just 10 days. And when we go back into contact tracing, that 2 days prior to symptom onset is really, really a significant part of contact tracing and does lead to quarantining people pretty regularly. Speaking of the word quarantine, this is a different situation than isolation. They're related, of course, but quarantine is really just the separation and restriction of movement when exposed to a contagious disease. So for COVID-19, that is a 14-day period of quarantine. The incubation period or onset of symptoms is typically 2 to 14 days. And it's really important to recognize here too that there's a misconception that having a negative COVID test during a quarantine period releases someone from that quarantine, and that is not the case at all. A negative test is a negative test at that moment in time, but during the quarantining period, which is the incubation period of COVID-19, symptom onset can happen at any time. So again, a misconception is that a negative test will result in getting out of quarantine. We've heard a lot about community spread, and community spread is really just defined by contracting a virus without a known contact with an infected person. And that is obviously where we are in society right now. That's not unique to our region. Community spread is a very significant issue that everyone is dealing with right now, and you're unable to trace back where the virus was contracted. So the public health measures of mask distancing, proper hygiene, staying home when not feeling well, those are all important to limiting community spread. And it's also really important to understand what happens in the community impacts our school environment tremendously. It goes without saying that we really want everything to be back to normal. We want our kids to be in school all day, every day. But we're not in that situation right now, and it's very important to understand that what does happen outside of school has a tremendous impact on what happens inside of the school walls. I'll go share a few different scenarios with you that we've had to deal with this year. Titled these district case studies. I'm going to run through 4 of them as just examples of the many case studies that we could have had. But one of our very first situations was a high school boys soccer program. And there was a positive case within that program in August, and contact tracing determined that the entire team was a close contact of positive cases. And it's a little bit different in athletics because of the way in which our athletes are interacting, and physical exertion does change things a little bit in terms of close contacts. The entire team was required to quarantine for 14 days, lost practice time in contests, and missed the first 4 days of school as a result. The second case included our elementary students in a daycare facility. We found out in September that we had a daycare where some of our students attended. One of the daycare workers was a positive case. And for the 7 students that attended that after school care, they were determined to be a close contact of a positive daycare worker, which meant that all 7 of those students had to be quarantined for 14 days and shift to remote learning. The third case I'm going to share with you is a kindergarten classroom, and this I think caught us all a little bit off guard. This was on October 26th. We had a student that was symptomatic and a close contact of a positive case. Typically, that would have meant that we would have, that student would have been quarantined, but because of our setup in the district with being able to maintain 6 feet of distancing, we expected that really to be an isolated case. The issue is that in spite of our desks being 6 feet apart, all 10 students in that kindergarten classroom were quarantined, and that came from Hamilton County Health Department guidance that kindergarten is too young to reasonably expect proper distancing and hygiene requirements that would keep the spread from happening. So in spite of our best efforts, we did just have to go ahead and quarantine the entire kindergarten classroom. The fourth case to share is a positive staff member, and this was in October. We had a staff member test positive, and during contact tracing, it resulted in 8 students being considered a close contact. And all 8 of those students, of course, would then have been quarantined for 14 days, and the staff member was out of the district for 10 days. I think it's good here to just reemphasize the whole idea of quarantining versus isolation. A reminder that with COVID-19, it's a 10-day isolation period, but a 14-day quarantine period. So it is very possible and does happen where someone who is a positive case and has completed their isolation has returned to school or work prior to someone who has been quarantined for being in a close contact of that person. That seems a little bit counterintuitive, but it really comes down to being able to overcome COVID-19 versus the incubation period of COVID-19 being 14 days. Sometimes hard to understand a little bit. But getting through all of this, I just want to get now to the point of sharing a little bit about what happened last week and the shift to remote learning really all of a sudden. And it really did come upon us very, very quickly. So I wanted to share this. You may have seen this before. This is our district dashboard for COVID-19 data updating. We do submit this information to the state, as well as we post this on our website every Wednesday. The state, I believe it goes in on Monday. We update this for our website on Wednesdays. This was the week of October 28th through November 4th. And as you take a look, just look across the top here at staff. Staff is on the top, students are on the bottom. The columns across are elementary, middle, high school, and district totals. And so even just, really 3 weeks ago, we were looking at a very small number of staff quarantines and a relatively small number of student quarantines as well. And at that time, all of those quarantines were really due to outside of school factors. These were not quarantines that were happening inside of our building. Very heavy at the student, at the elementary level for that submission. Just 1 week later, this would have been the week leading up to last Wednesday. This really did explode on us. The numbers across the top for staff, we ended up with 2 confirmed firsthand positive cases among our staff. Still only 1 quarantine, but you can see a very significant increase in confirmed cases of students and a dramatic increase in quarantines. So you might ask the question, what happened? Well, there were a few things that happened during that time period. Starting on the 10th of November, we had 21 high school students that were quarantined, including the entire girls basketball team. Again, because of a close contact of a positive case that again resulted in quarantining of students. The following day, the 11th, 16 students were quarantined due to being close contacts of a positive case during what was during a weekend weekend party. Wednesday or last week on the 11th, I sent out my first video message explaining what we were seeing and that we were at risk of having to look at shifting to remote learning simply because we were starting to see much greater virus activity from outside the community coming into the building. It resulted in quarantines, it resulted in increase in cases, and it was a bit of a concern obviously for us, and that resulted in that message that I sent on Wednesday to all of our families. The following day, we started our day with looking at our middle school students and needing to quarantine 34 middle school students, including the entire boys basketball teams, and again with some additional close contacts from reasons outside of the school. This was really the tipping point, to be very honest with you. When we talked with the health department, we talked about these issues along with additional students across all 3 buildings that were either positive or quarantined due to close contact. We had become what the health department would have called a bit of an outbreak location. And that was really significant because what we do with each case is we initiate contact tracing and notifying the health department, in which they talk through this entire situation and help to navigate the whole process. One positive case in a district puts the district in watch status, according to the health department. 2 positive cases changes it to an outbreak. And the real important part of this is that, according to the health department, if we are seeing evidence of spread within the school environment in any way, then that strongly supports shifting to remote learning. And if you go back to the slides I showed earlier of the data that's coming out of the health department right now, with the number of cases per 100,000, this was a lot of the decision making that went into that shifting to remote learning. We were seeing what looked to be very significant spread that was happening within our school environment, with the athletic department, with students that were outside of athletics. It was becoming pretty significant. And the data, that what you saw previously from our COVID-19 dashboard, really shows what those numbers look like. So based on the events of November 10th through the 12th, there was certainly evidence of spread, and that made the decision for us to move forward with shifting to remote learning. So I know that one of the some of the feedback that's been received is that going from kind of that warning message on Wednesday to shifting to remote learning on Thursday seemed to be awfully quick and not giving any real chance to have advance warning. Well, the circumstances of that day, of the 12th of November, really again was a tipping point with the number of students that we were seeing that were close contacts or needing to be quarantined, and again, the evidence of spread within the school walls. I'm going to give a quick update on, since we made that transition, we are now in just finished day 3 of the switch to remote learning. We did very rapidly turn around distribution of Chromebooks to students in kindergarten and 1st grade. And also we know that some of those students had devices at home. This was an opportunity to support remote learning, but we also needed to recognize that our staff is not, at kindergarten and 1st grade, this has not been the primary mode of instruction this year. So for those students that were in person. So this is going to take a bit of time to make that transition. But again, the opportunity to get some support for remote learning to our kindergarten and 1st grade students was really important. And we did that by breaking apart some of our Chromebook carts that we had and got those out to our students so that they would have access. We also scheduled meal distribution for Monday and Thursday of this week. We did suspend all extracurricular activities. This was a bit of an opportunity to hit the reset button and try to get past the Thanksgiving holiday without any further issues, certainly as we saw that transmission happening, potentially happening there through the athletic department. Of course, we shifted to remote learning for all students, and there are exceptions for that for certain students that have additional support needs or where remote learning is not possible. So there are just a few students that are coming in the building right now to receive those services. And of course, we're doing ongoing COVID-19 case management, including reporting and tracing new cases and close contacts. And of course, we've had additional cases that have come out since we shifted to remote, including 2 staff probable cases and 4 additional staff members that have been quarantined. This is the dashboard a little bit early. For those of you that are watching tonight, this will be posted on our website tomorrow, but this is what will be posted unless there is additional changes to it between now and then. But you can see that the numbers have actually increased once again from last week's dashboard update, again up to 6 confirmed staff members and 10 staff members quarantined. That's significant. We'll get into that a little bit more here in just a minute. And then from a student perspective, we have 10 confirmed student cases and 119 students currently quarantined. So the priorities really right now for us are really to kind of take stock in the ability to maintain the continuity of instruction. When you start seeing the number of staff that are quarantined and are positive cases, this has a real significant potential to impact instruction. So there's a lot of contingency planning for how to move forward with the continuity of instruction for those staff members that are isolated for 10 days. We are obviously, for those staff members that are positive, they are on leave and they are not permitted to work as a result of them being sick. For those that are quarantined, we are making every effort to accommodate those staff members so that we are able to continue instruction for those classes. We really are addressing the impacts of community spread. The regional infection rates are impacting all communities. We have staff members that are dealing with impacts that other districts are making for decisions that COVID-19 is having on their district as well. So for staff members that have kids that live in or that attend another school district, those decisions have an impact on the ability of our staff to maintain instruction in schools. Once again, it's a matter of trying to figure out ways to accommodate those staff members so we can maintain the instruction for our students. And I mentioned this before, but close contact of a positive case is really a very significant concern to maintaining our staffing levels. It's not a secret that, you know, school districts are people organizations, and without our people, we're not able to provide the services that are expected. So it's really important for us right now to make sure that we are assessing every individual staff situation that comes our way and doing everything we can to accommodate those staff members so that they can actually work from home if necessary. This is not an ideal situation, but you know, given the other option of having someone take leave so that they can care for a child who's quarantined, let's say, for example, it would be in our best interest and students' best interest to make that accommodation so that a staff member could teach from home. The bottom line is our goal is to provide consistency for students so that they can continue their learning in spite of what we're dealing with remote learning. And again, the hopes for being able to come back to school on November 30th. That really gets us to our last slide of the night. November 30th is our planned return date. We will obviously be following additional guidance and information and making all decisions. It does not happen quickly. It is not something that we take very lightly. It's a very significant decision that has to be made, and we try to try to gather as much information as possible from those that provide guidance as well as internal conversations and decision making. Staffing is just a really major concern. There is a substitute teacher shortage, and it really may have an impact to have in-person learning. There are certainly stories out there of districts that have had to shift to remote learning or are not in school for days at a time because of staffing issues. For some districts, that also includes bus transportation. You know, there are districts that have shifted to remote simply because they can't get their students there. So that is not something we are dealing with, but certainly the classroom teachers and our support staff are part of the factors in determining whether or not we were able to stay in-person learning. Previously, if we were short subs, we might be able to divide students into other classrooms and we would have coverage that may take place, but due to spacing constraints under the COVID protocols, we just simply are not able to do that. We also know that the Thanksgiving holiday is projected to increase the number of infections, and so it's just an important thing for all families to really have a plan in place should remote learning need to continue. Again, that's not the goal, but that is a certain possibility. And so the question might be, when will we find out? And it's just probably important to think of this as really, you know, we kind of have to make these decisions somewhat in real time. If you think back to a time where there was inclement weather, for example, and a predicted snowstorm was coming in, that snowstorm may or may not happen, and it may or may not have caused a day out of school. This is a different version of the same kind of thing. It's very possible on any given day that we simply don't have the staff to provide in-person learning for our students. So when you think about the need for subs and that there being a sub shortage so that we have at least supervision in our classrooms, that is obviously a very significant concern. And if we do have to shift to remote learning, then we are at least able to provide instruction remotely, and we don't have our students the supervision issues within the building. So that is something that we have to really consider. Again, the notification of switch to remote learning may happen at any time. As soon as possible is always our goal, but we would be looking for things like evidence of transmission in the building, lack of staffing, which we just talked about, and that could potentially be building specific, or obviously inclement weather will be a shift to remote learning as well. So there are just a lot of different factors and considerations that we have to take into account. And it is really a very difficult process, but it's also important to understand kind of the back story of what goes into making these decisions. And again, the primary emphasis here is to maintain continuity of services and learning for our students, as well as maintaining our safety and well-being of students and staff. So that probably took a little bit longer than I would have liked, but it was a lot of information to share, and wanted to make sure I provided all the information that I could that helps those that are on the call here tonight, as well as those that may watch this later, an opportunity to at least understand what are the factors and the issues that go into some of the decisions that we've had to make here in the last, certainly in the last week, and we'll continue having to make in the near future, as we would suspect. So at this point, I first of all, again, like to thank all of you for being a part of this evening, and hopefully you have found this to be helpful. If you have questions, I am more than happy to answer those tonight, and you probably have some of the same questions that others may have too. So at this point, Ms. Lewis, if you could just kind of help me find those that might have an interest in asking questions, we'll unmute and we'll go from there. And it could be one of the easier ways to do this is in the chat feature. If you have a question, that might help guide us to who needs to be unmuted, and we can have that person answer the question. Our goal here is not to have everybody talking over each other. That's easy to do in these meetings. So we'll see if we can do that. Again, if you have a question, maybe let's use the chat feature, and then we'll unmute you and we'll get the question started. All right, Sarah.
Jason, I've unmuted Amy. It looks like she raised her hand. So Amy, I have unmuted you if you'd like to ask your question.
Okay, I just had a question about sports. I was curious if the district plans to follow the state of Ohio in winter sports, or if we would make our own decision on that.
It's a great question. And Sarah, I believe, also asked kind of the same question in the chat feature. So there are multiple ways to either raise a hand or ask a question through the chat. So either way, we will get to these questions. But it's a great question. It's been probably one of the hot topics within the county calls right now. I will tell you, in the last week or so, late last week, the Ohio High School Athletic Association sent out a survey to all superintendents, athletic directors, and principals, really asking for feedback on based upon the current status of the virus and the transmission, what our thoughts were across postponing the season, delaying the season, what would happen if that happens, what do we do about practices. So it's really, to me, I think one of the first indicators that there is a question mark around what to do about the winter sports season. Indoors is significantly more challenging than the fall season, where most of our sports were outdoors. That also includes our ability to have spectators. So I think I'm starting to get to a bit of a longer answer just to let you know that there is a lot of factors that will be considered, and we will certainly look to follow kind of our state guidance. But at the same time, there is a need to look at some individual district information as well. Like based on what I've just showed you right now, there was transmission that was happening within our athletic department. And that really could have an indicator of whether or not we're able to even continue. If we have a positive case that results in quarantine in the middle of the season where we would be forced to shut down a team, that certainly happened in the fall, and it's continued to happen through I know the football playoffs and other sports here this fall. So it is something we will have to address, but I know that part of our conversation with the CHL superintendents, and particularly really it's more so through the athletic directors, but with us involved as well, trying to find some medium ground on being able to have some consistency of how we operate in terms of fans, spectators, those kinds of things. Middle school athletics is certainly a challenge with smaller gyms. That our basketball at the middle school are to be home fans only, simply because of the numbers. There's a 15% capacity limit right now on all of our gyms or indoor spaces, simply because of trying to maintain distancing. That's the same percentage as what was in the outdoor facilities in the fall. So we deal with the same thing in the wintertime. And if you think about our high school gym, as large as that is, the capacity for fans this season is 92. So the plan right now is to, let's say, a Friday night basketball triple header. Those are 3 separate events: a freshman game, a JV game, a high school game, or a varsity game. The gym will be cleared out in between those contests. It will be cleaned. Then we'll be able to admit the next wave of spectators in, and we'll do that again prior to the varsity game. Again, the goal is to be able to get our students, our participants, a chance for family members to watch them perform and participate. I'm not sure if that answers all the questions, but certainly our plan is to continue moving forward, but there will be a lot of different variables and factors. So that kind of was both of those questions at the same time. Again, you can either use the chat feature or raise your hand and we'll get more questions.
Patrick, I'll unmute you as well. Give me just a second here. I saw you waving your hand there. Let me find you in the list. All right, I think you are unmuted, Mr. Orman.
All right, thank you so much. I just want to make 2 quick comments, and any response will be greatly appreciated. But I guess my big concern right now, I think we're obviously in a time of community spread, and I don't think that's gonna stop this winter. I hate to think that, but I think that's where we're at. You guys have busted your butt to put in a school schedule, half day, assuring kids wearing masks, assuring kids are 6 feet apart in the classroom. Yet after school, we put these kids right next to each other, playing football, basketball, and other activities. Maybe wouldn't this be a prudent time to say the schools are for education right now? And maybe, unfortunately, I hate to say it, and I know it hurts, but maybe cancel all those other activities and just limit some of this spread, and let's use these schools to educate our children. That would be my first comment, if I could get a response.
Mm-hmm. So the first, I'll respond to that really with, I think that is exactly what we're kind of referring to, that this is a very, very delicate situation with sports in general, but particularly winter sports. You are not alone in that sentiment. The other part to that, however, is that we all know that athletics are such an important part, and extracurriculars, I won't say just athletics, but extracurriculars are such an important part of the school experience. And it really does have an impact on our students, their own mental well-being, and it gives them a productive place to go outside of school. I think the argument that some people would make to canceling athletics is if we cancel athletics, kids are going to find ways to be together anyway. So the opportunity to be in a school environment, productive outside of school activities is any time that we are together, period, it creates an entirely new level of close contact and spread. This just is in a more supervised environment. And yes, I would agree with you, but I can also understand exactly the other side of that kids are going to find ways to get together, and they are. And it does have an impact on what we see inside of our building too. So again, not a great answer for you, but it is a topic of conversation at every single superintendent meeting I'm in. Is what are we going to do this winter? And I think we're already seeing some of the impacts of that as we are getting the season started.
All right, and the other thing, I'm just, I guess from the educational point of view, I'm the grandparent of a first grader, and I guess I'm just, from an educational point of view, obviously she should be in school for 6 hours. We know that can't work. She was in school for 3 hours, and now that doesn't work, which I understand. But as far as the remote learning, now she's online with her teacher for a hair more than an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm working for the next 4 with her. How do you square that up with, I guess when you said you were going to remote learning, that I thought the teacher was going to be online with them, obviously with some breaks and stuff for more than an hour. I just feel like I'm doing all the work.
Well, I'm going to probably, respond to that in a couple of different ways. I think you're really dealing with a couple of different issues here. We, in the elementary level, we have certain teachers right now that have been designated to be remote learning instructors. And that has had an opportunity to be developed over the last 12 weeks or so, into probably different than what you are seeing for someone who has done this now for 3 days. The intent is to shift to remote learning, but also developmental appropriateness would say that students, 6-year-olds really shouldn't be looking at a screen for 6 hours a day. And so the intent, I believe, would be very much to provide activities, to provide instruction, have breaks, be able to shift around and all those kind of things. But again, I will fully acknowledge that, our teachers that are shifting to remote learning right now for the first time during the school year, it's going to take a little bit of time for them to develop the same kind of ability to do that as those that have been doing it all year long. So it's not ideal, and we certainly are hoping it's not permanent. But for right now, this transition has been a difficult one for our kindergarten and our first grade teachers, no question. And I would like to think that we won't have to get to this point again, but at the same time, that this is a work in progress, and not just for kindergarten and first grade teachers, but really for everyone this year. So again, I don't know that that's a great answer either, but I think this is a work in progress as we make that shift to remote learning.
Well, when you say work in progress, I guess I'm thinking that we knew this was coming, and it's very likely going to come all winter long, I would suspect. Is it going to get better? I mean, are we planning for that? Maybe January, February?
We are planning all the time for how we move forward. Absolutely. And this came probably earlier than we expected. Again, that there was no indication that we would be in a position to go to remote learning as quickly as we did. We watched the data. We look at the data every single day. It was not evident even a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that we were shifting to this method very soon. That the object of being able to be able to do it for a day or two at a time was what we were really looking for at the time. Now clearly there's a different level of spread that has changed what we've had to do. And so yes, there is planning to help make this better. I know our elementary principal is working with her team regularly on how we continue to improve what's happening, particularly at the younger grade levels. And those are the most challenging grade levels to do remote learning. There's no question about that.
All right, I appreciate that, and don't think I don't appreciate what you guys are doing. I'm just looking for, not looking forward to what could be a very long winter.
I completely understand.
Thank you very much.
Sure. It looks like there's a question in the chat from Amy. Details of how you believe the spread was happening within the school and sports during unstructured time due to non-compliance with precautions put in place. Yeah, it's a great question. That in general with spread, you're dealing with when in athletics. You've got an indoor facility. You've got a team that is working together. I was a former basketball player, so I know that a lot of the questions about winter sports have been about wrestling, and yes, that's a different level of concern. But as a former basketball player, who really played quite a bit of basketball, the amount of close contact during practice, drills, contests, if you're in practice for an hour and a half, working on defensive drills, you're working on boxing out, you're doing, sprints, conditioning, whatever it is, you are so frequently in less than 6 feet of space for that combined 15 minutes of time over a 24-hour period. That would happen in a single practice without question. So I don't believe it has anything to do with protocols or unsupervised time. It's simply a matter of, participating in the athletic in the activity. Could it be from something else? We'll never know. But when you do, it could very well could be that it happened outside of school and it just was brought into the basketball program. That's probably very likely. But again, anytime you have that kind of contact with any individuals for that period of time, and particularly when you are, exerting, the energy and breathing hard, and of course we know that singing and talking loudly and heavy breathing just expels, the particles and the virus even more so. It is it's very easy to see how that can spread. But I don't believe there's any non-compliance issues. I know that our athletic director, our coaching staff has worked really hard throughout the fall to get us through the fall season relatively smoothly, aside from that first issue to start the year with soccer. Unfortunate that happened, but getting through all of our seasons with all the sports was really a real positive. And then unfortunately, we're kind of off to a rocky start here this winter. Any other questions tonight? In the education world, this is called wait time. I see that smile, Mr. Ormond. I think you're familiar with that one. All right.
Mr. Enix, it looks like there's another question in the
I
chat.
just saw that pop in. What data will have to be seen to make a decision to return to hybrid learning? Great question. Right now, what we will be planning on is absolutely returning on November 30th. So it's been a hotly debated topic, though, because when you think about what's getting ready to happen with the Thanksgiving holiday, all the indications are that having more contact during the holiday is going to increase the spread. I think that's expected. What we will not have access to during the time period of next Wednesday through the following Sunday, so that five-day period, is we will not have the same access to attendance that's happening every single day with our students. We will not have access with our staff to be talking through what's going on with them. And of course, our nurses, they're on holiday too. So they will not be monitoring the phones in the way that we're monitoring right now. So I think what our current plan is to return on Monday, November 30th. probably the biggest indicator of why we might not come back on the 30th might be when we start looking at the need for substitute teachers on that Monday. If, let's say, over the course of the next week or so, we have a number of staff members that are either testing positive, if we are finding out that our staff members are needing to quarantine because of being a close contact, it could be that that is the primary trigger that would put us back to remote learning on the 30th. Of course, we're all hoping that's not the case, but that's probably the number one indicator, because we will not have a good sense of what's happening with students during the Thanksgiving holiday. So we will expect to be able to have our students back to the building, and we will address any of those kind of issues when we come back in the best way that we can. But staffing is really, really a significant challenge. And without having the subs in place to come in and take on the substitute role, it will be a number one priority, a number one factor in that decision making. It's a great question, though. I get asked that question quite a bit. I also was asked the question, what's the tipping point for switching from hybrid to remote? The tipping point was absolutely seeing 30 some middle school students lining the hallway in the clinic and spilling out into the cafeteria, all sitting 6 feet apart, all waiting to have parents come and picking them up because they were going home for quarantine. And then on top of that, the staffing that went along with it. To me, that absolutely was the tipping point, and the numbers dictated. And again, that transmission of happening inside the building absolutely made a difference. And I'll also add real quickly, since there aren't any other questions pending right now, that we are a little bit unique in the fact that we're a K-12 campus, all in one building. So the questions previously that I've been asked, and it's good questions, why is it some other districts are able to really focus in on just certain schools? Well, the biggest part about that is they're in different buildings, physically in different locations. We are all in one location in our K-12 campus, and so we're all in the same airflow system. We've got the same ventilation. We are in proximity every day. So it is a little bit of a different scenario when you have all students and all staff in the district all in one place, as opposed to, let's say, a Deer Park down the street that has multiple buildings. It could be that having the 712 building shift to remote a couple weeks ago while the others are remaining hybrid was something that could happen. But we're just not in that situation at this point, based on the needs of what we're dealing with. It could be, again, that we might have a staffing issue, let's say at the high school, where we don't have enough substitutes, and if we can't make accommodations and make that work, it's possible we could shift to remote learning for the day because of staffing at the high school, and yet middle school and elementary remain open, again, presuming we're back. Okay, Amy, it looks like you have another question. Will there be data that comes in from the health department on the quarantines that have happened to see if they've turned positive? That's a great question. And I'm glad you asked that, because that is a study that's currently happening from the Ohio Department of Health and the Ohio State University collaborative. There are 3 districts in our region that are participating in this study. That is Mason, Lakota, and Princeton, I believe. And they are, again, doing some type of a testing, kind of a voluntary way of saying, if you are a close contact of a positive case, that you can subject yourself, again, voluntarily to a test to see if you are positive. And the goal is to find out how much actual transmission is happening during the quarantine process. The data, at least what started this particular type of testing in this case study, is the fact that there's not been seen a lot of transmission happening in the school setting. Certainly we have the 6 feet of distance between our desks. There are districts that have not done that, but universally what was being reported is not a lot of transmission happening in the school setting. So this study is going to be able to determine a little bit more clearly if in fact the quarantine or the close contact is creating transmission within the school environment. That may have an impact on the guidance that the state provides for coming back to school or for being in school. So while we don't have the data from that right now, it is anticipated that study would be concluded by early to mid-December, and any guidance changes that would come from that would likely come at that time. So it is a great question and something we are kind of anxiously awaiting to see if any of that guidance does change. Looks like Nikki.
And going with that, will that affect, or are there some studies regarding, not to bring athletics back, I realize, and it's such a small portion. Yes, we want to get the students back first, but will those studies affect, if a case was brought in from home and no other quarantined athletes got COVID, will that affect as a plus to continuing possibly with the winter?
It's possible. I think that the major factor there in the school environment is that during the school day and in classrooms and throughout the building, there are masks being worn. Of course, in basketball or any other athletic activity, there are no masks, and that makes a major difference.
Very true. Thank you.
Sure. All right, we have reached the 6:30 or so timeline for tonight's planned meeting. I want to once again thank you for all of you taking some time out tonight to join us. Thank you for your questions. I hope this has been informative and helpful to you to help you understand a little bit more of what's going on internally when it comes to decision making. I know we all don't always have all of the information as to why certain decisions are being made, and that was the goal tonight, is to be able to share that with you. And you can, again, be kind of the information sharers if you like. Again, this video or this session has been recorded and will be uploaded to RCCSD Live, which is the same location where our board meetings are archived for people to be able to watch those at a later time. And we'll be sharing this information also with all of our families through the presentation I shared with you tonight. That will be sent out along with our board review and update from tomorrow night for everyone. So again, I want to thank you once again for your participation tonight. If you have any questions as you think about anything that we've talked about this evening that you would like to follow up with, please feel free to reach out at any time. Give me a call or send me an email. I will certainly get back with you as soon as possible, and wish for everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. Please stay safe, stay well, take care, and we'll hope to have all of our students back coming up here on November 30th. Thank you.